Hello, everyone. Welcome to the No Zoo Lines podcast. My name is Ari, and I'm joined by Chad once again. This is episode 14 of the No Zoo Lines podcast. And today we kind of have something special. It's a little bit different than what we've done. We're actually going to be spotlighting something in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but in particular, police Jiu Jitsu and law enforcement training. Chad and I are going to be talking about takedowns or throws and how to control someone who doesn't want to be controlled, essentially. And we're going to talk about the specifics on what we think law enforcement curriculums should have for their takedown section. As you know, PJJ is not just jiu-jitsu. We have striking, we have takedowns, we have weapon retention. These are all really important. But today we're specifically going to be talking about the takedown portion of PJJ. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, brother. Yeah, the thought is, guys, for those of you out there who are either looking to train on your own and get better, or am I responsible for some kind of curriculum, or you just want to look at your department curriculum or what you currently train, and are you covering the different areas that are going to come up in the fight? And so Ari and I have talked about this, and we've trained this multiple times. And the idea is if I were to have a complete DT training program to make myself or the officers around me competent, what's that going to consist of? What things should we be sure we're training? And um, one of the key things is going to be anything in your curriculum ought to have principles and concepts that are overarching. So I'm going to mention a couple, and then Ari and I, as we break down different components of this, we can refer back to it as needed. But there's three things on our subject that we fight to control and or break, and that is going to be their posture, where their head is in relation to their hips, shoulders, knees, toes. Is their head forward of their hips? Is their head behind it? Is it outside, side to side? With that posture break, we can begin to break their athleticism and their strength. The second thing is let's attack their structure, and structure is closely related to posture. If I break his posture or her posture forward or backwards, I break their structure. And structure is the other person's ability to move athletically and be strong and to deliver force or absorb force. So I want to break or interrupt structure. Another way to attack structure is to win inside position, and that's going to come up in these takedowns as well. Another way to break structures is to attack someone's base, and that's going to come up in the discussion as well in the different takedown areas that we're going to highlight. Base. If my feet are close together, I have poor base. If they're super far apart, I have poor base. If I'm on one foot, the other foot's off the ground, I have bad base. If my feet are crossed, if you cement a leg to the ground and drive them that way, they have bad base. So
Mhm.
base is compromising their connection to the ground, their ability to move, their ability to lift or be athletic. And so we want to compromise or attack that. And then finally, we want to create angles. If I have an angle and my hips face my bad guy and their hips face away, well, then that's always going to give me an advantage and multiple advantages. I can strike better from there, hit takedowns. It's less likely that I'll be harmed or damaged in that fight. I can introduce weapons if needed. Angles win fights. And so oftentimes when I teach these, whatever it is we're going to talk about next, I
Mhm.
say, hey, if you can win two of the three primary principles, if I can beat posture and structure plus an angle, my the degree of success goes way up. And if I compromise your posture, your structure, and your base, plus I have an angle, I'm likely to get a takedown. So keep those things in mind if you're out there developing a curriculum. We like those principles. Those are fairly easy to teach. Ari and I have both taught them for a long time. You can also teach them on the ground regarding sweeps, attack posture, attack structure, attack base, create angles. So it comes up a lot. And so, with those principles in mind, Ari, what's our first area that a takedown curriculum should have?
Well, before we started the podcast, we kind of look at the body. It's very interesting how you have to kind of segment the body. This is how I look at it for takedowns.
Yep.
And I would say that there are probably four fundamental areas on how we as officers are taking suspects down. Are we attacking upper body versus upper body? Is it upper body versus lower body? Is it lower body versus lower body? That type of thing. So we talk about that. And within that subsect, we have different areas. So the first one we're going to probably talk about is kind of the two-on-one, which is super common in PJJ, and a two-on-one, basically grabbing the arm. And you describe it as basically anything from the shoulder down to the wrist, and how do we manipulate this lever, and what do we do with it? So I would say that's where we would first start.
Yeah, and I like any kind of a two-on-one hold. If you guys have seen our videos, you've seen a lot of two-on-ones. Some of the two-on-one positioning that we use quite a bit are going to be like your wrestling Russian, where both hands are this way. And PJJ, a lot of times I'll rotate this hand over, so I've got it to use as a cross fulcrum or lever on the arm. But that two-on-one grip, where we're hugging and we're pulling the arm in close to us, that gives us a great amount of control. Another way we use a two-on-one grip is a baseball bat grip at the end of the wrist, and we anchor the hand down or we make it very heavy. We
Mhm.
can also anchor above the elbow and at the wrist and hang off the arm. We can also hit a wrist weave if they pull that arm in. All of these are ways that we try to get two arms on one. That also lets us create angles by dragging that arm across our body or across our subject's body. And we can create those dominant angles that we're searching for. So two-on-ones are a great way to utilize some control over one side of the body and either use that to take the individual down or escort them or in a team setting or even a solo setting. So those are some of the two-on-one um, opportunities that we see quite often. Ari, when you think of a two-on-one, is there anything else you use with those or any other ways you use those?
No, I try to keep it simple. I think what we're falling into, some of the police jiu-jitsu and courses out there, and some of the instructors that are coming on scene, and even people who are veterans of it, we can't overcomplicate it. I'm seeing a lot of moves now. And it's like, oh, you're showing the two-on-one, you're doing the wrist weave again. It's like, yeah, we are, because we want to get really proficient in it. And I realize that our attention span is getting smaller and smaller as the years go by, but we can't get caught into this like, hey, what's the newest and greatest and flashiest shit to use? Because it's not going to help us. So I think that some people are trying to throw in the stuff to kind of separate them from old school guys, right? But there's a disservice I think we're doing to the profession if we add too much, because they're not going to be able to retain it. So having said all that, I think what you said about the two-on-one, those are essentially gripping and how you grip. That's kind of how I did it. I can't think of any other thing that I would specifically add other than this, which you're probably going to talk about. When and how we take people down will depend on their aggression level. So, am I going to be grabbing a simple, let's just say that I'm hanging, doing a baseball bat grip at the end, and I'm just holding on to it, and they're going crazy. That is probably, I'm not going to keep holding on to that. I'm probably going to go to a body lock takedown that I can get more control. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And this is why there's another part of your curriculum build out, guys. If you're out there in podcast land listening to us, we believe it's essential that you have external connection takedowns for those maybe people or those obstructively resistant people who are pulling away, they're stripping grips, they're refusing to turn around, they won't stay set up for cuffing, they pull their hands apart, whatever the case may be. I want to move them from point A to point B. This is not, those external arm takedowns are not necessarily best for the person who's already aggressively trying to harm you. They're coming forward with strikes, things like that. So yes, this is an external grip on a limb, and it's limb control for our obstructive or active resistant people, not necessarily aggressive. Now, Ari, another place that um, I feel like is not utilized correctly are wrist or joint locks off the external arm, shoulder to wrist. So where do you find actual application that you could utilize in an actual fight?
So this is a discussion which goes back and forward within the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community a lot. I would say here's my opener. If you're going to be using wrist locks in a real fight, you better be really, really good at them and understand body mechanics and how to control someone. Will they work all the time? No, they won't. No move works 100% of the time. If it did, we'd only need one. So I understand that. I use wrist locks all the time in my policing career to control people. I typically will use it as what I refer to as the opener, which is I know that there's a chance of resistance that's going to come. So I want to have control over their body very quickly. Obviously, factors like being super high or super dedicated, that may not affect them. I would say of all the wrist locks that I've done in all my years, I've done hundreds and hundreds. I would say maybe I've had a handful, maybe three that just didn't work. So I would say percentage wise, for me, it's worked very well. However, I do recognize that if I'm controlling a wrist and that pain compliance and that structure is working, then I can do my stuff. However, immediately when I read the body kinetically that it's not working, I now go on to a stronger grip, which would be a 2-on-1. Maybe it's a takedown, maybe it's a body lock. So you have to be alive to changing. You have to.
That's it. That's it. So guys, for that obstructive resistant person, for that person we're going to escort from point A to point B, maybe move them to a wall to do a team tactic to take them into custody, maybe even team takedowns. Those external grips are good grips to have. So that would bring us to a next major category, and that would be clinch or body lock. And I would if you look at your curriculum currently, if you're a law enforcement trainer out there and you're listening to this podcast, you say, well, we've got the wristy twisty stuff, we've got the hug arm bar, we've got the wrist weave, the pullback is another good
Mhm.
thing from that external area. We have those in our curriculum, but we don't have any kind of body lock or clinch takedowns. I would change that. The body
Yeah.
lock or the clinch takedown is going to be for that aggressive, dedicated subject who's coming forward and he is fighting you or she is fighting you. It's a fight. And so that's going to constitute your double unders to a body lock. That's going to constitute over unders. That's going to constitute body locks with the head in front, body locks with the head behind. And like you said a minute ago, I could start on an external attachment and then the person could turn into me and be striking. I might transition to that body lock or clinch series. So body locks or clinches. Ari, what do you have on those?
Common thing, yeah, but you look at a tree, like we can hang off the branch of a tree. I get it, but sometimes we need to kind of attach ourselves to the trunk. So that will be dependent on what's going on. So what you're now defining, Chad, is we're talking about that 2-on-1 external. So you've got that arm. Now we've moved to the uh, trunk of the body, which is a body lock. And now we've subdivided it if your head is in front or is your head is behind, because that will change some things, but it still falls into that clinch body work. And I would agree with you, like the aggressive person that needs to be immediately controlled, probably one of my favorites. The body lock takedown is like, I think it's standard in our industry that that is like the one that really works well.
Yeah, it really works well. And we've got multiple series off of there. We've got your body locks. If you end up in an over under, we can switch to a knee tap and run across the front. We have foot sweeps, which we're going to talk about later,
Yep.
but those can happen from a body lock. You can combine some of these different attachment points. If you'll make a well-rounded curriculum, what you're going to be able to begin to find is mesh points where things intersect and you can actually start to mix them. Another thing that I would consider in the clinch is some kind of snap down as well. If maybe I've got a body lock and they hollow their hips out to try to break my grip and I snap them forward down to the ground,
Mhm.
all those things. Now, one of the big things that I think is a change within the last 10 years, because time goes so fast. When I first started getting head behind, it was always a rear trip and many times a sacrifice type trip where I was going underneath the person, rolling them over me. And that was kind of all the rage as things have evolved. And basically, the evolution has been if I miss that sacrifice, role, even in a competition setting like jiu-jitsu or like MMA. If the other person wrestled and just keeps their head high, they just turn and come top if you sacrifice underneath them. So we've gone away from that on the sporting side, and that kind of this is a reason that I believe people should train on a routine basis.
Mhm.
I saw the shift away from any kind of sacrifice fall where I block the rear heel and I
Yeah.
fall, I sacrifice. One thing that always was a little bit of a problem for me is you're dropping onto your gun belt. Many times I would drop onto my gun side, which could be hard into my side, depending on where my soft body armor was during the fight. If it had risen up and exposed my lower rib cage, like my floating rib, that could bruise me and be uncomfortable. And I know because I used to try it in kit to see how it
Mhm.
felt.
Mhm.
And and then once I started seeing guys, it works a good percentage of the time, but when it doesn't work, you often end up on bottom. You're almost for sure going to end up side control bottom or half guard bottom. Instead of that, I saw in the fight industry first, them start to use their head to take the person to their hands. We're trying to put their hands on the ground. And I said, man, that would be a great place in a real fight. If their hands were out in front of them, I knew where the hands were. They were on the ground. They weren't in their own waistband. They're not coming on top.
Mhm.
So the one big change I've seen within the industry that I think is positive is when our head slips behind, we're still going to put them on their face. And really, we want them on their face anyway. And then you mentioned earlier the comment about branches and then a trunk. I think Kyle McCutcheon said that, but I think
Okay.
we were both there.
Yeah, I think it was
But
Kyle. You're right.
Kyle is also one of our main guys who, when he breaks a guy down forward and the guy ends up in the position where if you would have built the house, as they say, in that turtle position on all fours, Kyle and even your partner Jason in Invictus are both very, very good at breaking guys down. Mike Bland, another very talented guy on breaking people down. So when we slip that head behind, if you're developing a curriculum out there, you've got body lock head in front, which could set them on their butt, or you switch and take their feet and go forward. But if your head slips to the back, let's put them to their face and then continue to break them down
Mhm.
and make that your first go-to off of that head slipping behind. If I get my head behind and I'm driving them forward and I can't drive them onto their face, I can sit them on their butt and still stay high. So as you build out your takedown curriculum, I think it's important as you consider what you're going to put in there as maybe you're developing that or pressure testing what you already have. Look and see, are you doing anything sacrifice for real events? Because you have to understand that sacrifice throws fail. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not even saying you can't do them if you're really good at them. I just would hesitate to teach them to people who aren't really good at them. And I would hesitate to do them
Mhm.
just because I could end up in that inferior position. So as you consider your clinch options out there in podcast land, also the inside trip and outside trip, which are very popular in MMA,
Mhm.
remember you might be performing this on pavement. So be a little careful about dropping to a knee and driving through the person and using your leg to trip them backwards, which we would do in MMA or jiu-jitsu. So take those body lock and those clinch takedowns and evaluate them on what surfaces it's going to be on and where am I going to be if I miss, and then build your curriculum from there.
And it's funny because that leads into the segue of part of the body lock takedown series, as we call it. I think another branch in their subsect would be what we refer to as the single or the double leg takedown. Now, you and I chatted about this. This is, in my opinion, not an ideal thing for the average untrained police officer or barely trained police officer. I would even go so far as to say, even if you're a black belt, but you're not really good at it, maybe avoid that because you're sacrificing yourself. Now, you had mentioned, well, maybe they're a D1 or an Olympic wrestler. That's a whole different thing. So let's talk about the takedown, the single and the double in the police world.
So one of the issues that I see oftentimes when I talk to a police department that's consulting with me and they're looking for curriculum development or curriculum evaluation, and I'll say, well, can I see your curriculum? And then I'll go to takedowns, for example. It'll have some kind of wrist or bastardized Aikido or Japanese Jiu Jitsu takedown at the end of a lever, and then oftentimes it'll have a double leg or a single leg in their curriculum, like, and the guys don't train any of that, and they can't do any of it, and they're not doing it on calls. So, um, a double or a single, multiple issues. Number one is, especially for double legs, your primary counter is a sprawl. And if someone were to sprawl and someone's shooting a double from a nose to nose, head up angle, we're wrestling, and I shoot my double. If I don't secure it and I get sprawled on, I end up belly down on the ground where the suspect should be, and the suspect ends up on top of me where I should be. And that is horrifically bad.
Yeah.
That there's nothing correct about that. Now, can I wrestle out of there and can I fight out? Sure. Could
Mhm.
I get stuck there in a fight? I might. And so have I trained on getting out of those positions? Absolutely. But I don't want to shoot, and I don't even do this in jiu-jitsu or MMA anymore. The rule for a double or a single, if you didn't wrestle at a high level, and even if you did, but definitely if you didn't, if you wrestled at those levels, you can almost blast through folks.
Yeah.
Like nobody's shutting you down. You're just going to take people down at will, and I'm not going to correct you very often. And here's the other thing that a high level wrestler will do that I'm not worried about. He shoots his double, the guy stuffs him. He's not going to go to his knees and stop. Non Even guys who wrestle in the MMA or the jiu-jitsu room, but they've never had a wrestling match, they've never been on a team, they've never cut weight and then gone and competed for a full season at a level, high school or even beyond high school, college or higher.
Yeah.
Those people, when they get stuffed, they stop and they go to their knees and they drop. And I do it. And I try to tell myself not to do it. Really, really good guys will get resistance. They'll switch their angle and they'll drive, and their feet will never stop moving,
Yeah.
and they'll work their way out of that shot. Guys who didn't wrestle will get buried under the weight of a sprawl, and we can't have it. So the rule is I have to have a strong angle, at least looking at their hip, if not almost behind them, to shoot singles or doubles. And then the other guy can't sprawl effectively. So I'm not going to end up under him if I miss. And it also makes my percentage of doubles and singles, percentage of success, go through the roof. So that's our general rule on doubles or singles. Let's create an angle. Now, in a team tactic, high-low, which a lot of departments use, I
Hmm.
still tell guys, if you have a partner going high, don't go nose on. Be opposite each other almost. Like one guy is on one side anchoring or holding on to an arm, the other person's on the other side, and they can go body lock down to the low, or they can shoot low. I don't like to, in general, just go from standing to all the way down and shoot my shot, because I'm not good at that. I have, and I work on it. I don't. The guys who are good at that have thousands of reps. Their level change is effortless.
Yeah.
The level change in their sleep, their penetration steps, all that are amazing. Even with my background, I'm not that good. I will attach and then I will work my way down to that. And I find that to be a more effective way to teach police officers. Then I'm either going to snatch that single up and we run a high single series at PJJ, or I'm going to bind the legs and basically kind of end up in a high low, but on the hip as opposed to nose,
Yeah.
one of the person. So create your angles on those lower level attacks. Oh,
Is
real
yeah.
quick, one more thought. Another reason I don't just go low is you end up under their waistline where they probably have weapons, and they just pull out a gun and shoot you in the back of the head or stab you. And that's another reason I like to go to the waist first, and sometimes you'll feel it.
Yeah.
So I go arm, waist, and
Mhm.
then I slide down into my double or my single. All right, go ahead, Ari.
Okay. So the last one would be what we refer to as lower body versus lower body, which is the throws. So I told you before the podcast started, I tell my students, now this is very general, but I would say a takedown for me is typically upper body versus upper body or upper body versus lower body. A throw in my world is lower body versus lower body. Now I understand that there's some variations in there, but that was kind of a good way to think about it. So if you think about judo throws or foot sweeps, or trips or things like that, that turns into kind of more of a throwing motion or hip throws. So that's what we have as our last one. So the question is, Are there any good throws for PJJ and should we include them?
Yeah, 100%. Foot sweeps are great. Hip tosses can be very, very good. Um, you know, I I like lower amplitude, very controlled throws where I have some kind of upper body connection and I'm foot sweeping or lower controlling their descent to the ground.
Yeah.
Unless the level of resistance is so high that almost deadly force is authorized, and that might be a robbery suspect that we haven't searched. I feel the gun in the struggle. He gets set up for cuffing. He begins to fight. I feel the gun. Now I really don't care if you suplex him or you throw him on his head.
Hmm.
But let's say it's not a robbery suspect; it's a misdemeanor battery suspect
Hmm.
that had an empty hand slap to a domestic partner and we're on pavement, I have to control that throw. And also we're conducting the takedown to control to cuffing. So I prefer throws where I'm attached in the upper body and it's a foot sweep or it's a hip toss as opposed to almost a throw using the word toss.
Hmm.
uh, so that it's controlled descent. I'm still attached when we hit the ground. I'm moving right into control position, and then I'm moving right into belly down for cuffing if I have to turn them or whatever. I don't like a ton of separation or a ton of high amplitude throws, um, just because it's a level of force. I have to be aware of it. So
Now, in my experience, so let's just talk about like an outer reaping throw and a sotogari, which is one of the most common throws out there. I've heard different debates from different people saying that they call it, what do they call it? The schoolyard throw, and it's not really effective or whatever like that. I've seen it work so many times in the
we
field.
teach it at Metro. It definitely works.
Even cops who do not train will step behind a suspect and take them down. And it's one of those things. So
It absolutely works.
I would say it absolutely works. Now, if you're talking about controlling, so we do have a duty of care once we're taking someone down. If they have a jacket or clothing, we train in the gis a lot. So for me, I can do an outer reap on you, Chad, and you could basically go ass over tea kettle, but I can control that descent because I'm holding your collar and your sleeve. If it is me palm to the face, kind of holding the tricep, and I sweep your leg, and if you don't know how to break fall, your head's hitting the mat or the concrete, and that's it. So we have to be very careful on our engagement based on the aggression, as you pointed out, especially for throws like that.
Yeah, and the control. So at Vegas Metro, we teach them to cup and
Yep.
hold the head as we take them down for that outside. I think we call it an outside reap just to give it a name
That's
in the
what it is.
curriculum. But that's what it is,
That's what
man.
it
So
is.
we have that in Vegas Metro, and then I think what you do if you're looking at your curriculum is you have your officers train in those different takedowns, and then you just add a team element where someone is anchoring or controlling a far arm, and then they can do all those takedowns individually. If you are controlling both arms on their descent, you do have a duty to care, and that can be done by either letting go of a hand so they can catch themselves and then rejoining, or lowering them to the ground in a very controlled manner. And we've trained both at Vegas Metro.
So if we were to kind of just do a little recap right now on what we think that PJJ curriculums should include for the takedown portion, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of how we've divided it. You're looking at the first segment, which would be the end of the lever, as Clutch would say, grabbing the branch. So you're talking about the 2-on-1, basically from the shoulder to the wrist. So that could be wrist locks, could be 2-on-1s, Russians, and things like that. So that's kind of our first area. The second area would be clinching with head behind or head in front, where your upper body is clinching on to the suspect, and then you're taking them down that way. We also have a subcategory in that, which is basically your single or double. So more of your wrestling takedowns where your upper body is attacking the lower body. And lastly, we're talking about our throws, which are lower body versus lower body. And these are kind of the different areas that we think that should be included. Now, I am also a strong believer in not overwhelming the student with all these things. You could give a couple of each one and just rep them, and you can get pretty good at them. So here's a question for you. I'm just now thinking, Chad, there's so many awesome moves in jiu-jitsu and even police jiu-jitsu. If a student comes up to you and goes, "Hey, what do I pick and choose and how do I know what's good?" And like, or Chad, you're showing me something different now. Like I thought it was supposed to be like this. Now it's changed. Like, how do we navigate all the great stuff that we are given in jiu-jitsu?
So I think it's the positions. So let's get a 2-on-1 attachment. Let's see how we can foot sweep from here. Let's see if we can bump the hip and then take them down. Let's um let's try the different. I'm doing the same foot sweep. I can do the foot sweep from a body lock if the guy walks his hips around behind me. So really what I want the student to learn is I want you to be able to get to a good 2-on-1 attachment. I want you to be able to get to a good wrist weave. I want you to be able to get to a good body lock. I want you to be able to exercise body lock head in front, head behind. I want you to be able to snatch up a leg safely. I want you to be able to execute foot sweeps from a clinch position. And so really it's the positions that I want you to become comfortable with, and then the other things will come along.
Yeah, my Japanese jiu-jitsu instructor, Steve Hisco, he has a great thing and we talk about it and it's called commonality of technique. So you don't necessarily need 1,000 different moves, but if you can recognize that you can use one move in several different positions, then that really cuts down on thinking time. And that's helped me tremendously in real fights. So,
Tremendously. And I'm fighting to spots. And
mm,
so your curriculum, that's why I think your curriculum has to have exterior, body lock, lower body, and then finally your foot sweeps,
mhm.
because I want the cops to start to learn to get to certain spots and then execute takedowns from those spots. The fight is not the takedown. The fight is position and getting in position where you could do a takedown. And then being able to stay in that position um and and mitigate damage and begin to win the struggle from these different positions. And that's really what I want to do.
Cool. I kind of like these series, and I think we're going to do a few more. Just little, not super long podcasts, but just to talk
Nope.
about the certain things. I think this is good. That was good. Any other final thoughts on this?
Yeah, look to draw and modify things from it, and this is Chad's opinion. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel and make up some new martial art, or like counter wrestling by some dude who doesn't know how to wrestle. Like, learn Japanese jiu-jitsu, judo, and wrestling, and particularly Greco-Roman wrestling. These are going to be things you're going to draw from, in my opinion, and then you're going to start to institute those and build those out throughout your curriculum. Now, if you don't want to go through that process, just follow Invictus or C4C PJJ, because we're already deep into that process.
Yep.
And once again, establish a a set of takedowns from 2-on-1 arm lock, 2-on-1 configurations with an arm, from body locks, and then from lower body, fighting that lower body with different trips or sweeps. If you'll do that and then pressure test it and create games where I'm basically getting closed hands in different areas against a resistive opponent, that's going to give you a ton of viable material that then you can dumb down or make fundamental and then rep it out again and again and again and again. And that's how you're going to get good at wrestling.
Yeah. I heard another phrase. You say this a little differently, but so recently I was in Connecticut at Rob Maygow's school and for seminar. So Master Pedro Sauer was there and he did a little speech and he was just talking about the difference between doing jujitsu and understanding jujitsu.
Yeah.
And he says, we can all do jujitsu. That's fine. But when you start to understand jujitsu, it fundamentally changes the game. And then, so I sat with that for a while. And it basically is talking about concepts versus technique. And he's just saying, understand body positioning and anatomy. You can make up jujitsu on the spot if you know where the base is and the structure is. And unbalancing and all that stuff. And so I really like that. It's like, don't do jujitsu, understand jujitsu. Now that's easier said than done because it's taken me 20 years to still figure this out. But I'm now understanding jujitsu much more than I did when I started. And that is a bonus and a boon of experience on the mat.
That's a great way to end, and I couldn't say it more. And the only way to understand it is if you partake in it.
Yeah, totally.
So, go train a lot out there, guys, and just a great way to be evaluate your curriculum and then hit us up if you have questions on stuff to add or things to fine tune as you look at your own curriculum at your department.
Yeah. And two other things. So, just in about 2 weeks' time on October 3rd, Invictus is going to be in Salt Lake City for FightCon. Oh, it's on this side, on FightCon, which is an expo there. They have boxing, they have guys in full armor that are fighting. Like it's just basically a martial arts it's who's who. So, we're really looking forward to that. We're going to do a seminar on October 3rd, which is the Friday, which is 3:30 to 5:30, open to law enforcement and anyone who obviously supports us. And then the other news that Chad and I have is we just talked about it. We are releasing the No Zoo Lions rash guard. It is likely going to go up just after this podcast. We're going to put it on our social media and there'll be pre-orders. We'll put it up for about 10 days and then it will take several weeks for it to get here and then we'll send them out. So if you want a No Zoo Lions rash guard, which is going to be our first one, and I've already put up the design and they're killer, you better get on board. So that's
Yep.
it. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, remember, lead, don't follow, and check us out, No Zoo Lions Podcast.